we are tracking the new evidence that's putting heat on Donald Trump and raising questions about a possible second indictment of the former president. There he was at his first indictment, his New York arraignment. But now there's news of this damning tape that's put more focus on a different jurisdiction, on that federal probe in Washington, where Trump was caught on tape admitting key parts of a possible crime in stealing and hiding classified documents after leaving office. The tape is from after he was in the White House, 2021. And that's bad for him based on what he appears to admit, because prosecutors are already using it while gathering their grand jury testimony. And it's showing jurors how Trump himself admits and acknowledges on the tape that he had classified materials. This is a total breakthrough in the evidence in this case. Now, real talk, some people might say, okay, Ari, didn't we already know that Trump took those documents down to Mar-a-Lago and the feds seized them in that search and took them back? Didn't we know all that? Yes. But in court, to win a case like this, prosecutors basically must prove, 1, the documents were classified. 2, Trump willfully took or directed action to take the documents. And 3, he intended to keep or use classified documents. So just to walk through this, 1 is proven. That's why the feds took them back. And no court, by the way, has overruled that. 2 is basically proven as well. Trump himself admitting he took all these documents. He hasn't exactly denied that part of the case. So 3 was kind of the last hurdle. You have to prove Trump's knowing culpability about the classified documents. That, hey, I got this and it's classified. That kind of thing. So just to be as straightforward as possible, when you see Donald Trump admit something like this on tape, acknowledging on the tape it's classified, well, then we're almost kind of done here. Not legally. Indeed, even if charged, you'll hear people like me on your news stations say he is legally presumed innocent. But with regard to the evidence, I'm saying, colloquially, in plain English, this rounds out the case for Special Counsel Smith, as long as the accounts of this tape are accurate. And as we do around here, we're confirming the tape exists. It was played to grand jurors. Multiple outlets now have reported it, but we have not heard the tape. If we had the audio, of course, we would play it for you. But if this is accurate, each of those key planks of the case against Donald Trump would be quite strongly provable. That is the context, legally and otherwise, for why this week you've heard just about everyone, from prosecutors to a former Trump defense lawyer, saying something to the effect of, this tape basically makes the case game over.
This is a huge piece of evidence for the special counsel.
It eviscerates the 2 defenses that Trump has put forward. Those are out the door now because he's admitted that he understood there were restraints on what he could do with documents.
This is evidentiary gold.
Is just the last nail in a coffin that already has a whole lot of nails in it.
This is game over.
I think they have their foot on his neck.
There's no way that he will not be charged.
That's a pretty broad assessment from different experts right there, including, as we showed you, Trump's own lawyer. And there's only a small number of people who would have known before this broke out in public that Trump was privately admitting that part, which adds the evidence of criminal intent, as I walked through with you just now. Now, the group of people that would have already known about this would, of course, include the people in the room who heard it, like Trump aides, one of whom is reportedly the person who was asked about this tape, which she made during her grand jury appearance. Then there's the top lawyers. They are going to be more familiar with this stuff. They have attorney-client privilege. They have to deal with grand jury evidence. And some of Trump's lawyers even ended up in the unusual position of testifying to the grand jury themselves. And that's where this tapes bombshell, which has made so much news this week, overlaps with another development: the clashes and fights among Trump lawyers spilling into public. A top Trump lawyer recently resigning. Reports in several outlets that Trump lawyers are so concerned about one of their leaders, you may have heard about, Boris Epstein, that they threatened a group resignation, which they called a murder-suicide pact if one lawyer was fired while pushing for some changes to what was happening. Now, on the one hand, Trump has had many, many lawyer problems before. Lawyers turned witnesses like Michael Cohen, lawyers turned public critics like the statement we just aired tonight from Ty Cobb. So to be precise, it wouldn't be true to say that every time Trump has a lawyer problem, he gets indicted or anything like that. He had him during the Mueller probe. And that case didn't bring him down legally or even lead to an impeachment. And he had 2 other impeachments besides that set of facts. But this time, these lawyers in this documents case are doing things that seem like they may be bracing for something else, something worse, an indictment. I say that not as a prediction, not as something to hope for, but just as an analysis of these facts as they come together. And it's actually pretty interesting now that we know a bit more about the tremendous heat in this case, because we know already one recently resigned. We know 2 of them requested a meeting with the Attorney General himself. And with all the documents that were discovered, and as I've said, proven according to the government to be classified, that was seen as a kind of a panic move or last-ditch effort to perhaps try to delay, forestall, or prevent a looming indictment. We also know several lawyers are trying to figure out how to make this novel defense that Trump could secretly and automatically, magically just declassify any document.
If you have the authority to declassify, you're not wedded to any bureaucratic process.
You would need to tell someone in the bureaucracy that you've done it. So who did he tell that he declassified?
We are not trying our case leak by leak.
Now, that defense sounds weak for a number of reasons. It has no precedent. It also shows something that I've been emphasizing with you as we've walked through these facts tonight. It shows that the lawyers probably figured out, because they had the stuff we're learning in public earlier. They knew how bad the evidence was earlier on. And they had to then still develop some other types of arguments. They probably have figured out they need to focus on claiming the documents are not classified and not contraband because they don't have any other defenses. They can't prove there were no documents on site. I just showed you some on the screen. They can't try to argue it was some honest misunderstanding where Trump didn't knowingly try to take them, because he himself has been admitting that. And that's why so many legal experts have been focused on the one thing they have been saying, but panning this sort of secret declassification defense.
These statements, quite frankly, are very, very damaging to him.
Check your privilege or he takes on a whole new meaning with this guy.
And these are clearly classified documents. They're marked classified. They belong to the U.S. government.
Thinking it in his head to declassify it, that would be a obscenely reckless way to handle declassification because no one else would know.
It doesn't change the fundamental argument, the other argument, that these documents are not his.
Yeah. I mean, just to be real, this is one of those what are we even talking about here kind of moments. Trump's lawyers have been making this extreme and novel set of arguments, and that extremism is becoming a little more understandable now that we're learning about all the damning evidence which they would have already known about. The feds have the docs. They have the witnesses. They have Trump's own public admissions. And so Trump's lawyers are left in this corner. They can't deny the act or argue that Trump was out of the loop, like someone who just sort of argues, hey, I let the movers pack the U-Haul. I didn't realize what they loaded. It's a big house. That is the kind of argument you can make if the U-Haul is filled with contraband or stolen material, and you say, hey, I didn't physically pack it. I hired some people. Well, there's no U-Haul defense left when Donald Trump admits to taking the stuff. So the lawyers now are doing something that, again, it's actually kind of interesting at a minimum, but also maybe very relevant if this is a federal trial. They're doing something that lawyers do, but that you only do as a kind of last resort. They have to argue that even if the government, in fact, classified these documents and deems them stolen, and even if Trump said on tape they were classified, which is part of what I just showed you tonight and why the tape is so damning, the lawyers have to make this sort of Cheshire Cat defense that, yeah, the government, which is the authority, says it's classified. Yeah, Trump said it was classified, but maybe they were just magically not classified. This is an argument that is deep, deep Alice in Wonderland territory. I mean, this is like you have to disagree with all the governing authority and the precedent and your own client, who could become a defendant, as he currently already is in New York, and say, I know you heard this, that, and the other, but just listen to the grinning cat and just go into that kind of soft psychological or psychedelic hypnosis and pretend everything is upside down. You can't even say believe Trump. You have to say don't believe Trump because when he said and acknowledged on tape it was classified, he was also wrong because he had forgotten or not realized or not remembered that you can magically declassify anything without even saying so. It's a type of defense, by the way, they are entitled to make it. But how long would you have to spend in Alice in Wonderland or on the things people use over there to find that at all believable? That is the legal question that is kind of sitting here. It has public perception and political components, but it is fundamentally, as all legal questions are supposed to be, about the truth and the evidence.